The Battle with Grendel from Beowulf. That night Beowulf and his men take the places of Hrothgar and the Danes inside of Heorot. While his men sleep, Beowulf lies awake, eager to meet with Grendel. Out from the march, from the foot of the misty hills and bogs, bearing God's hatred, Grendel came, hoping to kill anyone he could trap on his trip to High Heorot. He moved quickly through the cloudy night, up from the swampland, sliding silently toward that gold-shining hall. He had visited Hrothgar's home before. He knew the way. But never before nor after that night, found Heorot defended so firmly, his reception so harsh. He journeyed forever, joyless, straight to the door, and then snapped it open, tore its iron fasteners with a touch, and rushed angrily over the threshold. He strode quickly across the inland floor, snarling and fierce. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, burned with a gruesome light. Then he stopped, seeing the hall crowded with sleeping warriors, stuffed with rows of young soldiers resting together, and in his heart laughed. He relished the sight, intended to tear the life from those bodies by morning. The monster's mind was hot with the thought of food, and the feasting of his belly would soon know. But fate that night intended Grendel to gnaw the broken bones of his last human supper. Human eyes were watching his evil steps, waiting to see his swift, hard claws. Okay, so here you can see a little bit of foreshadowing there. It says, fate, because remember in the notes we talked about fatalism. Fate that night intended Grendel to gnaw on the broken bones of his last human supper. That means he'll never do that again. So take a minute to think about how you think this is going to end. Grendel snatched the first Geat. He came to, ripped him apart, cut his body to bits with powerful jaws, drank the blood from his veins, and bolted him down, hands and feet. Death and Grendel's great teeth came together, snapping life shut. So right there, very gruesomely, he just ate a guy, okay? Then he stepped to another still body, clutched at Beowulf with his claws, grasped at a strong-hearted, wakeful sleeper. So the next guy he grabbed was Beowulf, and instead he's a wakeful sleeper, so he's awake, and he's looking at him. And was instantly seized himself, claws bent back as Beowulf leaned up on one arm. That shepherd of evil, guardian of crime, there's some cannings there, knew that once there was nowhere on earth he had met a man whose hands were harder. His mind was flooded with fear, but nothing could take his talons and himself from that tight, hard grip. Grendel's one thought was to run from Beowulf, flee back to his marsh, and hide there. This was a different Heorot than the hall he had emptied. So he grabbed Beowulf, and Beowulf immediately grabbed him back and wasn't letting go. But Higelac's follower remembered his final boast and, standing erect, stopped the monster's flight, fastened those claws in his fists till they cracked, clutched Grendel closer. The infamous killer fought for his freedom, wanting no flesh but retreat, desiring nothing but escape. His claws had been caught, he was trapped. That trip to Heorot was a miserable journey for the writhing monster. The high hall rang, its roof boards swayed, and the Danes shook with terror. Down the aisles the battle swept, angry and wild. Heorot trembled wonderfully, built to withstand the blows, the struggling great bodies beating at its beautiful walls. Shaped and fastened with iron, inside and out, artfully worked, the building stood firm. Its benches rattled, fell to the floor, gold-covered boards grating as Grendel and Beowulf battled across them. So here, Beowulf and Grendel are like just slamming each other around. Grendel just wants to get loose, okay? He wants nothing else. He just wants to leave, okay? But, of course, Beowulf isn't letting him go. So they're like tearing the insides of Heorot apart. But they're saying what a great meat hall this was. It was a great building. It was built to withstand whatever. And clearly it still stands. Hrothgar's wise men had fashioned Heorot to stand forever. Only fire, they had planned, could shatter what such skill had put together, swallow in hot flames such splendor of ivory and iron and wood. Suddenly the sounds changed. The Danes started in new terror. Cowering in their bodies as the terrible screams of the Almighty's enemy sang in the darkness, the horrible shrieks of pain and the defeat, the tears torn out of Grendel's taut throat, held captive, caught in the arms of him who was of all the men on earth was the strongest. That mighty protector of men meant to hold the monster till its life leaped out, knowing the fiend was no use to anyone in Denmark. All of Beowulf's band had jumped from their beds, ancestral swords raised and ready, determined to protect their prince if they could. Their courage was great, but all wasted. They could hack at Grendel from every side, trying to open a path for his evil soul, but their points could not hurt him. The sharpest and hardest iron could not scratch at his skin, for that sin-stained demon had bewitched all men's weapons, laid spells that blunted every mortal man's blade. So Beowulf has Grendel and they're fighting. Beowulf's men jump up, are awake, have their swords ready, and are trying to help their leader, but they're not able to harm Grendel in any way because it says that he's laid spells on their weapons that if any weapon that tries to hurt him just turns blunt, so therefore it does no damage at all. And yet his time had come, his days were over, his death near. Down to hell he would go, swept groaning and helpless to the waiting hands of still worse fiends. Now he discovered, once the afflicter of men, tormentor of their days, what it meant to feud with the Almighty God. Grendel saw that his strength was deserting him, his claws bound fast, Higelac's brave follower tearing at his hands. The monster's hatred rose higher, but his power had gone. He twisted in pain, and the bleeding sinews deep in his shoulder snapped, muscle and bone split and broke. The battle was over. Beowulf had been granted a new glory. Grendel escaped, but wounded as he was, he could flee to his den, his miserable hole at the bottom of the marsh, only to die and to wait for the end of all of his days. And after that bloody combat, the Danes laughed with delight. So what happened here is Grendel knew he was losing, and again he's just pulling and pulling, trying to get away, but Beowulf isn't letting go. So Beowulf rips his arm off, like his shoulder down, just like rips it off. When it says the muscles and the bones split, right, right at the shoulder. So Grendel gets away. So he runs off, but he's mortally wounded. There's no way he's going to survive what just happened to him. He who had come from across the sea, bold and strong-minded, had driven affliction off, purged Herrick clean. He was happy now with the night's fierce work. The Danes had been served as he'd boasted he'd served them. Beowulf, a prince of the Geats, had killed Grendel, ended the grief, the sorrow, the suffering forced on Hrothgar's helpless people by a bloodthirsty fiend. No Dane doubted the victory, for the proof, hanging high from the rafters where Beowulf had hung it, was the monster's arm, claw, and shoulder and all. So after Beowulf ripped off his arm, knowing that Grendel is dead, everybody celebrates. There's like Beowulf was able to do what he said he was coming there to do, and as a trophy, Beowulf hung Grendel's arm, like from shoulder down, the whole nasty, ugly arm, all the sinew and the blood and stuff falling out, hung it up in the rafters. Okay, so it's like hanging up in the ceiling for everybody to see. Super gross. So after the battle, Hrothgar and his people celebrate Beowulf's victory over the monster Grendel. That night, however, Grendel's mother kidnaps and kills Hrothgar's closest friend and carries off the claw that Beowulf tore from her child. The next day, the horrified king tells Beowulf about the two monsters in their underwater lair. So Mama's mad. Mama came up, snatched Hrothgar, the king's best friend, and took her child's arm, okay, because she's mad that everybody killed her son. So this is Hrothgar speaking to Beowulf about the monster's lair, where Grendel and his mother live. They live in secret places, windy cliffs, wolf dens, where water pours from rocks, then runs underground, where mist streams like black clouds, and the groves of trees growing out over their lake are covered with frozen spray and wind down snake-like roots that reach as far as the water and help to keep it dark. At night the lake burns like a torch. No one knows its bottom, no wisdom reaches such depths. So Grendel and his mother live in a fiery lake. So the lake is dark and deep. It's always dark there. It's a really creepy place. It's a really deep lake. It says no one knows how deep it is. No one's ever been down there. No one knows what's down there. Just they know that Grendel and his mother live there. A deer hunted through the woods by a pack of hounds, a stag with great horns, driven through the forest from faraway places, prefers to die on those shores, refuses to save its own life in that water. So it's so bad and so creepy there that a deer that gets, is being hunted and is chased by a pack of dogs to the edge of the water In a normal place, a deer would hop into the water to try to save its life. Not here. The deer would just assume die. He's like, nope, I'm good. No water for me. It isn't far, nor is it a pleasant spot. When the wind stirs and storms, waves splash toward the sky, as dark as the air, as black as the rain that the heavens weep. Our only help again lies with you. Grendel's mother is hidden in her terrible home, in a place you've not seen. Seek it if you dare. Save us once more, and again twisted gold, heaped up ancient treasure, will reward you for the battle you win. So again, Hrothgar is asking Beowulf for his help. He's like, you know, clearly Grendel's mother is going to come back and wreak havoc on us in revenge for what we've done to her son. We need your help. You're the only way that we'll be able to be safe again. But if you go and you win the battle, you get even more treasure than you've already earned.